Hello and welcome to Wednesday Debate Live with Taghreed Hussein here on Nile TV International. Tonight we'll be talking about Egypt's continental leadership from the Mediterranean shores of Alexandria to the strategic heart of East Africa. Egypt is once again affirming the historic truth that Cairo remains one of Africa's foremost pillars of balance, of stability, of development, and definitely visionary leadership. At a moment of profound geopolitical transformation across the whole continent, President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi's dynamic African diplomacy has emerged as a defining force in reshaping the regional equations and strengthening the different African partnerships based definitely on mutual respect, on development, as well as shared identity and destiny. The remarkable timing of the President's official visit to Uganda, immediately following the high-profile visit of the French President Emmanuel Macron to Egypt before launching his African tour, has underscored Egypt's growing strategic weight in continental affairs. Macron's decision to begin his African tour from Egypt is definitely carrying high political symbolism. Cairo is not only a stop of diplomacy for Macron, but it's a recognition as well coming for Egypt's centrality in African, in Mediterranean, as well as in Middle Eastern affairs. Only days later, President el-Sisi headed to Uganda, where he held extensive talks with President Yoweri Museveni, covering trade, covering investment, irrigation, healthcare, regional security, and Nile cooperation. The President arrived back home earlier tonight. Well, along with our distinctive guest, His Excellency Ambassador Amb Medhat El Meligy, former assistant to the Foreign Minister, will be reading together the African scene and also messages of His Excellency President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi's visit to Uganda. And this is really meaningful only one day after President Museveni was sworn in for a new presidential term. So how the visit is reflecting Egypt's broader vision and vision for Africa, of course, one rooted in connectivity, in continental integration, and definitely discussing also sustainable development. Let's watch this report highlighting the President's Uganda visit, and we'll be back.
President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi paid an official visit to Uganda on Wednesday, carrying deep political, economic and strategic significance, reaffirming Egypt's growing momentum across the African continent and highlighting Cairo's commitment to stronger African partnerships based on development, stability, mutual respect and win-win cooperation. The visit comes at a highly important regional moment, only one day after Yoweri Museveni was sworn in for a new presidential term in Kampala, amid renewed Ugandan ambitions to accelerate economic growth, infrastructure modernization, regional integration and stronger cooperation with African partners in trade, investment and sustainable development sectors. The talks between the two presidents reflected the remarkable evolution in Egyptian-Ugandan relations during recent years, particularly under President el-Sisi's African outreach strategy, which has transformed Egypt into one of the continent's most active diplomatic and developmental powers. Discussions between the two leaders covered cooperation in agriculture, irrigation, healthcare, pharmaceuticals, renewable energy, trade, investment, infrastructure, training, and regional security cooperation. President el-Sisi emphasized Egypt's pride in its historic ties with Uganda and reaffirmed Cairo's readiness to deepen cooperation in sectors directly connected to African development priorities. The visit also demonstrated Egypt's broader vision towards East Africa and the Nile Basin, where Cairo has steadily expanded cooperation frameworks based on shared interests, sustainable development, climate-resilient water infrastructure, and coordinated management of water resources. Equally important was the political dimension of the talks. The two presidents exchanged views on developments in Sudan, South Sudan, Somalia, and Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, stressing the necessity of restoring stability through political solutions, African-led processes, stronger regional coordination, and respect for sovereignty, territorial integrity, and international law principles across the continent. President Sisi invited President Museveni to participate in the African Union Coordination Summit scheduled to be hosted by Egypt in June 2026 alongside an African Business Forum aimed at boosting continental investment, private sector partnerships, regional trade integration, and broader economic cooperation between African countries under Agenda 2063 development goals. As Egypt continues strengthening its African presence, President Sisi's visit to Uganda stands as a powerful reflection of Cairo's enduring belief that Africa's future will be built through cooperation, connectivity, stability, sustainable development, continental integration, balanced water management, and shared prosperity among all African nations.
Ambassador, the President's Uganda visit definitely is highlighting very important messages, and the timing itself is very important.
Of course, definitely, just like you mentioned it earlier, that this is the first official visit after Mr. Museveni was sworn in.
Yes.
And it has a very important and symbolic message, which is that Egypt is congratulating that as we've been in the past, and we had very close relations and close ties with Uganda, we will continue to have such relations. And actually Uganda, the relation with Uganda goes way back, especially with President Museveni, even before the time of President Abdel Fattah Sisi. We also had very good relations, but of course it grew stronger with President Abdel Fattah Sisi, who understands and realizes the weight that President Museveni represents into the African continent, and the precious relations we always had, whether we're talking bilaterally between the two countries or in the African arena and the international scope as well. So I believe that this visit was quite important to mark once again Egypt's long-standing relationship with Uganda, and to accompany it into broader horizons and to more development for the well-being of the two countries.
Definitely, Egypt strengthening, of course, its presence in Africa, and we're reaping the fruit of a very important year of Egypt's chairmanship, also of the African Union. Many important milestones, Ambassador, has been achieved. The President's foreign policy and African policy reshaping the perceptions of Egypt and of Egypt's vision vis-à-vis the African continent. How do you see it?
Well, I will tell you something. We have to give credit to President Abdel Fattah Sisi regarding this issue. I mean, before the President Sisi took power in 2014, and starting from that day, the Egyptian-African relation has taken a very serious turn. And once again, we have rediscovered our depth into Africa, our strong and deep relations with the continent. And President Sisi started with many visits to many African countries. Some of them even are very small nations, but are tied with Egypt with very strong relations. So there were many symbols in the visits of President Abdel Fattah Sisi. What I want to add, maybe because the economic spectrum was one of the most important one, is that yes, I hope that the private sector will take the lead after what the President is doing to enhance and to further develop the economic relations with the African country. I think that we are seeing all the world is trying to strengthen the relationship with the African countries, with the African continent. We've seen, of course, the French-African summit that took place 2 days ago,
yes,
and that President Sisi also was present there. And I think not just that, I mean, if we look a little bit further, we'll find that many countries are seeking stronger relation with the African countries. We can name, beside France, of course, we can name Russia, China, Turkey, and even some of the Gulf states,
yes,
who are deepening their relation with Africa. So Africa has changed, and it's ready for a new phase of relation with the rest of the world. And of course, maybe we'll need to talk a little bit further about the French relation with the African continent, because it has seen some turning point changes in the recent years. And but maybe this
yes, we will definitely also tackle
later.
this dimension and French President Macron's significant visit, but still in Uganda, and talking about His Excellency President Sisi's talks with President Museveni, we find more than one dimension. We find soft power dimensions as well, talking institutional organization, talking also training, which is a very important aspect in cooperation with the African countries, capacity building and more. How about our cooperation regarding those dimensions or those axes with Uganda?
Well, I think we have to give the credit to many Egyptian institutions working in this field, and
yes,
here I have to mention my own institution, which is the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We have a department that is designated for partnership with Africa,
yes,
and where we offer various scholarships and training courses to serve this goal of capacity building, as you eloquently mentioned it right now. And I think Uganda is one of the countries who are benefiting from these scholarship, from these courses that we are offering. It has a broad range of activities, starting from farming and agriculture and industry, and even business administration and many more, arriving to the field of police work and army building, also capacity building. So I think the range of, or the spectrum of the offers that we offer, not just actually to Uganda but to almost all African countries, is quite wide, and it helps to first to build a new generation of African who knows about Egypt a lot more than maybe their ancestors. Who, I mean, there is a gap between the old generation in the 60s who totally knew about Egypt, and then there was this gap in the middle before President Sisi arrived back in power. So now we are more and more infiltrated into Africa. We know more and more about their ambition, what they want, how to serve them better. And let's not forget one important pillar here is that Egypt, although all the turmoil that is englobing the whole area and the whole region of the Middle East, Egypt remained the stability point of the region. I mean, if you look to the east, to the west, to the south, you will find that the only stable country is Egypt. And this in itself helped to build new relations and new confidence into not just the leadership of Egypt, but also Egypt as a country, as a civilization that is always here and always stable and can always deliver to its African brothers and sisters the help they need and the cooperation they are seeking.
Yes, definitely. And this is a very important dimension, the sense of trust between Egypt and the African nations. And this was also praised during President Museveni's talks with President Sisi earlier in the day, praising Egypt's active continental role in Africa.
Well, definitely, we have a very important role. I mean, Egypt has vowed to always be the speaker of the continent. And we've done so many years, and it's becoming like a habit that we are taking all the burdens, all the problems of Africa to the international arena to expose the African problem. Let's not forget in the speech of President Sisi during the French-African summit, how he spoke in a very detailed way about the burden of the debts to the African countries, and Egypt is one of them. But it is not just an Egyptian problem, it's an African problem. I mean, as he put it in a very clear manner in front of President Macron, that the idea that sometimes the service of the debt surpass education and health care combined.
Yes.
which is a very heavy burden for African countries to carry on. And let's not forget something also important, that President Macron 2 years ago, he hosted a summit specifically to try to find new models for financing the African needs and the African necessities for development and so on. So I believe that President Macron is aware. He has changed also his let's say his strategy after the losses France received, especially from the many African countries,
yes.
Francophone countries, mainly in the Sahel and the Sahara area, namely Niger, Burkina Faso and Mali, and France found itself forced to be distanced from the heritage it always carried as an old colonial country into the region. And now France is coming with a new perspective, which is to have equality in partnership with the African countries. And I think this is a very important approach, but it's not the first time to be mentioned. So let's hope that this time we will see a new approach, a serious approach from France towards a real and equal partnership with the African countries.
Yes, regarding French President Macron's last visit, and we're watching also excerpts of this visit to Alexandria that was smashing headlines. French President Macron chose Egypt as the first stop of his African tour, and this in fact is significant in itself, and it sends many messages, isn't it?
Well, the message that I care about the most is that our relation, Egypt, with France has always been a very special relation, not just at the time of Macron, even before that and before that. I can't remember any French president who didn't visit Egypt on a very substantial visit. And the relation has always been very close between Egypt and France. So, of course, choosing Egypt to becoming the starting point, and we all, of course, remember the images that we've seen about President Macron running in the streets of Alexandria.
Yes.
And I think he is here talking to the Egyptian public at large, because he knows that such things, I mean, win the hearts of the people.
Are appealing to
Exactly.
Egyptians.
So this is one thing. Second, I think that during the summit, we've seen that there is a kind of coordination between what President Macron was talking about and what President Sisi after that was talking about. So it sounds like they both leaders spoke during the visit in Egypt about what should be tackled and how it should be tackled. And this led to this synchronization we've seen during the summit, and I believe that this should result in good initiatives and strategies, not just from France actually. I presume that it's going to be some strategy from Europe towards the African country, and I think this is one of the best benefit that we came out of this summit.
Right. Ambassador Meligy, if we're talking about this sense of connection from talking from the Mediterranean basin with the African interior and Egypt's geographic leverage in the whole region and also in the heart of Africa.
Well, I would like to say that before President Sisi, we somewhat, I don't want to use the word neglected Africa, but we did not give the kind of interest that we should have. And this, of course, led to the current crisis that we are having regarding the Nile River. And actually now, with this new approach, we are trying to build new bridges with many African countries. I think that we've seen that our priority is to the Nile Basin countries, especially when we are talking about development projects and how we could help our brothers and sisters over there. We all know, for instance, about the Nyerere Dam that is in Tanzania, and how this is helping the Tanzanian people to further develop their economy and so on. And of course, we are just talking about the President Museveni, who is one of the Nile Basin countries as well, and many other countries. Of course, we do have a serious problem with Ethiopia, and this is not a secret, because Ethiopia have chosen to do things in a unilateral way, not taking in consideration the countries that are affected the most, which is Egypt and Sudan.
Yes.
And if Ethiopia have other sources for water, we do not have but the River Nile to secure over 95% of our needs from water. So I think that not giving the attention we should to the African countries, and especially the Nile Basin countries, affected Egypt in a certain way, and I think President Sisi is trying to remedy the situation by having more economic ties with these countries on a base that is quite clear for everyone, which is the win-win approach. And this, I think, is the most trustworthy approach that you could use with African countries, because they have been taken advantage of several times, and from many colonial powers and so on. So when Egypt is coming to benefit those countries and also benefiting itself, I think that this is a very good approach that will put the trust that the African countries have in Egypt in its place.
Yes.
And that's why I'm proud of what we are doing now, trying to recuperate what was lost to a certain moment in history, and that we can build on that, as we are doing right now with many African nations, so that we can progress together.
Yes, definitely we're progressing together, and we've seen great footage, excerpts of Alexandria visit by French President Macron that has been circulating and going on viral also on social media. This visit is also bringing to symbolism more important connections also between Egypt and France, like culture. And definitely culture and soft power are among those important mechanisms for developing and further elevating relations.
Well, of course, I think that the relations between Egypt and France has always been marked as one of the strongest with an European country. And I think that also the deviation of positions between the European countries at large and the United States is actually helping to further strengthen the relations with other countries, because when you are going into the orbit of the United States, it doesn't give you much time and much energy to look at other countries that are of a certain importance. And now that there is a divergence between the position of the United States and the European countries, whether we are talking about the Israeli-Palestinian issue, whether we are talking about the Iranian war, there is now like a separation. And this actually enabled those countries to start looking for other strong relations that they should foster. And I think from here comes the European, not just the French, the European and many countries of the region, and Egypt is on top of the list, because, as I mentioned before, the stability that Egypt is enjoying, the infrastructure that we have reformed, so now we are ready to receive more investments. And I believe that the visits of such leaders like President Macron help to change and to formulate a new vision. I will give you a small example of that. When President Macron, before coming here, he was talking like any other leader, talking about the Palestinian rights and about this, and that the Palestinians should have their right to their country and so on. But it was just like pure theory or pure literature.
Yes.
But when he visited here and he saw with his own eyes from El Arish what is going on exactly in Gaza, from Rafah, I'm sorry, what is going on in Gaza, I think that his position changed dramatically, and he even said that he is considering recognizing the Palestinian state, which happened before. And this is due to just one visit and seeing with his own eyes. And as we say in Arabic,
seeing is believing.
Exactly, seeing is believing, and those who have seen are not like those who only heard.
Yes.
So I think that it's quite important that we maintain always personal and physical close ties with the countries that are interested in our well-being, hopefully, and to help us to advance economically and strategically in the region and with other countries in their area, especially when we are talking about Africa and the Middle East.
Definitely. Cairo is an indispensable gateway if we are talking engagement, whether with European countries or with African countries. If we are talking about this engagement and Egypt's role, yes, Egypt's role as a strategic mediator that has been respected and admired worldwide.
Well, Egypt have this, that Dr. Badr Abdelati have put it eloquently when he said that we have the strategic equilibrium. And it is true. I mean, even now that we are in the middle of this raging war, even though it looks quiet now, God help us to keep it this way, between Israel and the United States on one side and Iran on the other side, with the turmoil and that is englobing all the Gulf states, and that we have part of our army there to help maintain, even on logistic level, maintain the security of the Gulf countries. But nevertheless, I think that we have all heard about the declaration from Mohammed Bakr, the head of the Iranian parliament, that he understands that Egypt has to stand with the Gulf area. So, I mean, even with this, we are not growing enemies anywhere. We are trying to maintain the equilibrium and in the same time staying close to our principle that President Sisi have said since he took power in 2014, when he said that we are just across the street, if we can use this expression, and that we can come at any time if the Gulf countries need us for anything. And now he has put his mouth or his money where his mouth is, and he is proving to the Gulf countries, because as far as I know, it is not just the United Arab Emirates where there is an integral squadron of our army, but I think there are 2 or 3 more elsewhere in the Gulf countries to defend them or to help defend them. So I think that Egypt has always proven that it doesn't just say words that can be proven wrong. No, actually, when we say something, we mean it. And when President Sisi say that he is going to help if he can, he helps when he can.
Yes, definitely. Being a bridge linking Africa, linking Europe and the Middle East, what does it take? What sort of mechanism, Ambassador, do you think should be undertaken, and what does this reflect in itself?
We are the gateway of Europe to Africa. We have, as I just said it before, we have good relations with everyone. So we have good relations with Europe, we have very strong relations now with Africa, and we can help with the European to help more develop African countries. And I'm thinking here about some projects that were what we call tripartite projects.
Yes.
That a European country is financing a certain project and Egypt is doing the training for benefiting a third country, which is an African country who needs this kind of training and capacity building. And this could be repeated. And actually, also this was done before. Also, I remember with even Japan as part of some of the JICA projects. So actually, the idea of having these tripartite projects is an idea to be exploited so that we can help the African, but of course sometimes we need more financing to do broader projects and more ambitious development programs, and we need financing for that, and this is when the EU can, or some of the countries of the EU can come to achieve this goal in order to help the Africans in some countries that they need this kind of help.
Yes, the Africa Forward Summit, Ambassador, the Africa Forward Summit, Ambassador, that came timely actually, and the name itself of the summit is quite significant. How can we have the Africa that we all aspire?
Well, this is actually a very important thing. I serve personally in Africa, and this is a young continent. I mean, the average age is extremely young, and the young generation now is quite educated and quite intellectual. Africa is advancing, and we have brilliant examples to see from the near past. I mean, look at a country like Rwanda, for instance, that lost almost 1 million of its citizens in a massacre that took everybody. And right now it's one of the countries that has the best developing countries. So first of all, we have to have good governance, and I think that we are giving a good example of that here in Egypt for African countries. And if I may say something here, because this is quite controversial, but I think it's quite important to mention it. Some countries in Africa are suffering from corruption. And what I want to say is that many countries, especially from the West, are fostering on this corruption, because it's good to have someone corrupted in power. This helps them to do whatever they want, because they can be the one helping him to keep his regime in power. And in order to do so, they need a corrupted leader, so that they can do this. But of course, this is a minority, but still what I want to say that it's not always what they are preaching is what they want for Africa. Maybe they are preaching this for themselves, democracy and good governance values and so on. But when it comes to other countries, they prefer to have a corrupted system so that they could exploit it to their own benefit. And this is what led to, in the examples that we mentioned in Africa, this is what led to those countries to revolt against the French presence in the past, because they felt that this is not what France is doing is not in their best interest. And now France have understood the lesson, and that's why France wants to have a new strategy and a new approach to African countries in order to advance with them, because Africa is not Africa as it used to be, and accordingly France is not the same France colonial country that used to take advantage of its colonies.
Well, definitely the Africa Forward Summit came amid intense international cooperation for influence across Africa. Egypt has definitely succeeded in presenting itself as a trusted African partner with an independent vision that is mainly based on stability. I mean, it's a very important factor in Egypt foreseeing the security and stability of the African continent. Well, solving African problems by Africans.
This was the slogan of Egypt when we were president of the African Union. If you remember that, it was African solutions for African problems, and
yes,
not to intervene from outside the African continent into solving the African problems. But what I want to say here is that what you mentioned here, the stability, and this is a cornerstone in any civilization to maintain itself, in any development to stay where it is. And I believe that that Egypt represents this beautiful example. I mean, Egypt could fall easily into the turmoil that is englobing all the countries around us. And as I said it earlier, look at our east, at our west, south. We have problems, and these could affect us. That's why we need to have a strong army, and because this army is going to protect any unwanted infiltration from those turmoil stations.
Yeah.
And at the same time, we can provide the West with what they want in order to have a better cooperation, not just in Egypt, but Egypt as a gateway to Africa, as we said.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency, Ambassador Medhat El Meligy, former Assistant Foreign Minister, for the wise analysis and reading this important headline, and also throughout the President's comprehensive African tour. Many thanks for watching. That was Wednesday Debate Live, and I'm Taghreed Hussein, thanking you all for being with us.